Hello and welcome to Tech Takeaways, the podcast taking the technology's largest challenges and chopping them down into little bite-sized chunks just for you to enjoy at home. So I'm your host, as ever, Jason Fitzgerald, and I'm joined by my dynamic co-host, Paul Stringfellow.
Hi. Nice to be here again.
Yeah.
And can people enjoy our little bite-sized chunks on the road as well, or is it just at home?
I mean, bite-sized chunks can be enjoyed anywhere.
Excellent.
Can't they? You know,
just wanted to make sure.
Take them on the road, on the way to work, jogging, walking a dog, however you want to get this podcast.
But do it safely.
Yeah, and enjoy.
Indeed.
Yeah. So this week's episode is around SaaS Security Posture Management, or SSPM. So
we love an acronym.
What do we mean by this?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and actually it's something that I'm relatively new to. So as the viewer might know, alongside kind of the work that I do along with you, I do some research work as well. So I do some contracting firm for some contracting work for an analyst firm over in the US. And one of the areas they've asked me to pick up on recently has been SaaS Security Posture Management. And it's a really interesting area, and I think it's one of those things that people don't necessarily think about. So you asked, what is it? So often when people will take a SaaS platform, it might be a Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, Salesforce, list as long as your arm of SaaS platforms. Mm-hmm. What they'll often assume is that the SaaS platform itself, so if I'm putting anything in Microsoft 365, well, 365 is secure. And I think that's a fair enough assumption. Microsoft are working very hard to make sure 365 is secure so that, bad actors can't take the platform down, can't break in, can't steal data, et cetera, et cetera. And that's true. One of the issues, though, we get, it's not the platform that presents security risk. It's the way we use the platform that presents security risk.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. So if we talk about, putting data into SharePoint Online, by nature, SharePoint Online is quite secure.
Yep.
But if you, via a misconfiguration, open your SharePoint Online site up to the world, that is not secure for you.
Yeah.
But the platform itself is secure.
Yeah. Yeah, and you just kind of opened, it's like having a very secure house, but just unlocking all the doors or leaving them wide open and then wondering, well, why has somebody just wandered straight through? Well, it wasn't that the house was insecure, but leaving the front door wide open is a misconfiguration, but that's the right phrase for it as well, and I think it is those misconfigurations that often we don't know about, because you only have, even if we just take Microsoft 365, you can look at 365, can't you? And there's acres and acres of pages that you can go to make settings.
Absolutely, yeah. And, if we look at SaaS platforms now, businesses are using them more than they ever have done before. Yep. Companies that have traditionally had on-prem infrastructure are looking to say, what can I get rid of on-prem? Can I adopt a more cost-effective model and put it as a SaaS platform? SaaS platforms aren't inherently bad. They're actually quite good. The flip side of it, they take away all of the responsibility for, maintaining the underlying infrastructure. They're patched, they're well maintained. But I think that there is that misconception that because I'm paying someone else to do it, it is absolutely bulletproof secure. Yeah. I can put all my data in it and off I go, kind of thing. So I think SSPM is quite an interesting area. And I think that it is, we're going to see it as a bit of a growing area, because for all the reasons that you say there, people kind of look at these platforms and think, well, obviously they're secure, but often it's not. I mean, for me, it's about the when I look at it, it's around the so misconfiguration. So is the platform are the settings I've set reducing overall security of the platform? Do they introduce risk? Things like accidentally sharing out folders incorrectly, for example, to a wider audience than the intended recipients. Over provisioned user accounts. So user accounts that have more permissions than what they should have, or user accounts that are still within the platform that shouldn't be.
Yeah. So dormant accounts, so users no longer there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we touched on this previously on a previous episode where we spoke about identity platforms integrating into all of the SaaS platforms it use, and cyber attacks being able to launch from user accounts that are dormant. And then we've got compliance, industry compliance. If you're using a SaaS platform, is that going to meet the regulatory compliances that your industry needs to meet? Well, not necessarily, no. But with a few config changes, yes, it could do.
And I think you've kind of hit the crux of where these platforms play. And I'll just add one extra thing to it as well. So we've talked here about, you're looking at Microsoft 365, so people have Microsoft 365, but people might also have Salesforce and Slack and might be using Zoom and might be using Dropbox to share files. And that's fine as well, because you can configure all those and you can go to an SSPM vendor, and that SSPM vendor will probably have 50, 60, 150 pre-built integrations with well-known platforms. And that's great because of the platforms But one of the other things that is important to understand is, well, what are the things you don't know? When we see probably on a relatively regular basis, don't we? We get emails come to us as the people who are, looking after our infrastructure saying, this user has requested rights for this application to your Microsoft 365 or your Azure or your Google Workspace tenancy. And there's a lot of that happens inside of a platform, that people are adding third-party tools, which includes other SaaS vendors. So you're using a SaaS vendor that's also using other SaaS vendors as part of their solution. Yeah. And you don't know that. And actually, one of the things that is quite interesting, I think, in this space is a lot of these SSPM vendors are really good at discovering all of the applications. So some of them will do that via, you hook them up to Microsoft 365 and it will look through 365 and say, and here's another 700 applications that have access to your tenant because people have allowed it. And then it will give you a look at where the risk is. So, this user has given them these permissions, it's got access to this, and you might want to do something about that. And you will often get that kind of not only dormant users, but dormant connections. So somebody once signed up to an app, hooked it in with their, used their, Entra ID to sign up. Yeah. It made a connection into your tenancy, and then they stopped using it, but the connection still exists. And, we've heard a lot about kind of supply chain attacks recently. So all it needs is that third-party SaaS vendor to be breached. Suddenly they find they've got access to 1,000 customers who they didn't even know existed, and they're deploying. So I think actually that piece, but, so if we add those things together, what's it good at? Well, one is tells you the misconfigurations, stuff you know about, tells you about the things that you don't know about, gives you that kind of little bit of insight around compliance and regulatory framework. So, I want to be compliant with SOC or SOC 2, I want to be compliant with that. And here's the things that I need to do. And then the other thing that you actually want from these tools a lot of the time is at the very least remediation guidance. So what is it that I need to go and change in these platforms to fix the problem? It's all right telling me the problem exists, but how do I go fix it?
How do I actually act on it?
Yeah, and the very best things will automate that for you. But even the good platforms in that space, as long as they're telling you, here's some detailed explanation of how you go deal with it, it's a really valuable capability.
Absolutely, yes. So it's giving you visibility and stuff into things that you may not know about. It's giving you some kind of report on the data, to say these are the things, and it's giving you maybe a fix for it automated. So that's really powerful, isn't it? If we look at SSPM, who do you see as the key players with this?
So I think there's some really good key players in this space, and maybe rather than listing off vendors, it'll give you an idea of the way that they come at the market, maybe, because I think good vendors will mean different things to different people. So there's kind of a bunch of different routes to this. So some of the vendors in the space are have built from the ground up to do this. So they have been designed as, often they come out actually from a SaaS security point of view. So they've started as SaaS security vendors and have developed SSPM. So it's rare that they've started as SSPM vendors, but just the information they're getting, they can almost like put a dashboard in front of it and gives them SSPM. So you've got that at one end. You've got the vendors who have come from a CASB background, have come from Secure Web Gateway, etc., and they're taking that telemetry and gone, well, actually, we can pull all that thing together and present some kind of SSPM report. So you've kind of got that at the other scale. And then you've got ones that have come from like the app discovery background. So solutions where, actually one of my favorite techniques for app discovery, and you see a few vendors do this, is that they hook in with things like Exchange and Gmail and then look for who is it you've received emails from that would suggest, the email you get, thanks for signing up to our thing. You've just enrolled on. And so they use that, and then they tend to have like a big database, if you like, of applications they know about, and they tie these things together.
So,
but they tend to come at it from probably one of those three ways. They're either established vendors already who've come at this from a slightly different way. They are SaaS specific vendors, and they probably SaaS security, but have built SSPM maybe alongside or as part of, or they've come from this kind of app discovery background, and then it's a matter of looking at which one of those tend to be the best fit. So, if you're using one of the established platforms that can then easily add SSPM on top of that, a Zscaler, for example, can add SSPM on top of that, great, add SSPM on top of that. Or you're looking at some of these guys who have kind of been built from the ground up in this kind of space, then, they can give you something a little bit different in terms of their approach. And if you've really got no idea, or you just want something that gives you a little bit of insight into what you're running and what you've got, and doesn't necessarily give you all of the detailed telemetry, then actually these vendors who've come from a app discovery background can be quite a nice, easy road in, because they'll quickly discover a lot of applications, give you a little bit of insight to, are those applications secure, where there might be some risk, what's that vendor's risk profile look like? And it at least gives you something to go on. So, so there's lots of interesting ways into it. I think it's like a lot of new areas that start to develop. None of it's too set in its way yet. There's not necessarily a lot of standard approaches to dealing with this.
Okay.
So it's an opportunity to find, well, what is it that fits, and what's a good investment. But what I would say is that most of the vendors that I've spoken to in this area will all come and do some kind of risk assessment for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we always talk about visibility within a network. If from a cybersecurity perspective, if you know what you've got, you know where your data is, where your endpoints are, what your security posture looks like, you can take meaningful action to make yourself more secure, protect yourself, or even during an active incident, know what is happening. But when it comes to a SaaS platform, you're not in the dark. I'm not gonna say that, but the visibility may be reduced, because on your own network you got greater control. In a SaaS platform, you're more of a user than have full control. So the visibility is by nature reduced, and the posture of that platform, it's often quite hard to understand what the security posture of that platform is.
I think I probably would go as strong as saying in the dark. I think a lot of the time, and for numerous reasons, I think it's, you don't know what you don't know with this kind of stuff. So I think you can deploy a platform, but as we said before, even if you just and there's apart from really small companies, very few companies are only running one SaaS platform.
Yeah,
and even in those cases, there may be other SaaS platforms they're running, they just don't know they're running. So straight away they're in the dark then.
Yeah.
I think the complexity of a 365, a Google Workspace, reel off your favorite SaaS apps, the complexity of settings in those applications mean it's very difficult for you to get an overall view. Maybe if you've just got one application, you can go to things like Secure Score and stuff in 365 and it will give you some hints, but it's not giving you things like you're oversharing user access. You are, you're allowing users to overshare documents through links. It's not giving you that kind of stuff. So
it might be presenting it somewhere. Yeah, but it's not.
Yeah, finding
it's not center and forefront. Yeah. When you first log into that platform, if we look at, we spoke about M365, but Dropbox, Google Workspace, the more data the company's putting into them, the more that risk profile is growing. And so if you're putting all of your valuable data into those platforms, how do you ensure it? I mean, it is a real problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely is. And that's why I think it's, I think it was a good episode for us to do, because I don't think it's a conversation that we're having a lot with customers at the moment. I don't think lots of people are talking to us about well, I've got all these SaaS platforms. What does my security posture look like in them? So I think it's a good episode just to at least to start the conversation. And it might be great to hear some feedback from some of the watchers, some of the listeners to, just to get an idea of how they're dealing with SaaS security. Have they invested in a posture management tool? And if they have, which ones? So that kind of stuff would be useful. But I think, I said before, I think lots of the vendors, if you, by all means, drop us a note and I'll point you at some of the vendors that I looked at recently and have spoken to recently. But most of those vendors will give you some kind of free security assessment. They'll run their tool against your environment and tell you where the risks are. And that in itself, even if you don't invest in a tool after that in itself can be a really valuable help.
Yeah, I think that is the takeaway for this week's episode. Actually, get in touch and run a trial on them, understand where you stand with it. I think that's a great episode. So we hope you enjoyed the episode as well. If you've not yet subscribed, hit the subscribe button just below. We're available in all homes of good podcasts and bad podcasts, although we're a good podcast. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. We'll catch you next week.
Will do.